welcome. It's Alexa Linton here, your host for the Whole Horse Podcast. We're here to look at all the ways that the horse industry is changing before our very eyes in very cool, very amazing ways. And we're chatting with the people at the forefront of that change, the professionals, the trainers, the body workers, the researchers that are helping our lives with horses become better and better. Thanks for being here. I love that you're here and listening and learning. And if you ever have a guest that you want to suggest or a topic that you want to hear, just let me know, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. It means a lot, and I look forward to seeing you for season 4. Hi, everyone. It's Alexa Linton here, and you're here on the Whole Horse Podcast. And today on the podcast, we're here, episode 68 today. Amazing. Heading towards 70. And really want to thank you all. We're at, almost 70,000 downloads for heading into season 4. So stoked about that and excited for you all to be listening in. And today on the podcast, I have one of my faves back again. Heather Nelson is here. Thanks for being here, Heather.
I am always pleased to be here, Alexa, and I'm just so proud of you that you're at 68, that you're at season 4. I remember when we were discussing in the yard the Yeehaw Sisterhood. Remember the Yeehaw Sisterhood about supporting each other through horsey business, and I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Aw, thank you. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Heather and I live about 12 minutes apart here on Vancouver Island, and which is fantastic. And we've known each other for a heck of a long time now.
I don't even know how long now, Alexa.
I have no idea, and I can't remember how we met or anything
Me either.
like that. But it's been a long time, and and Heather's been my main trainer or instructor person for a while now, and it's just been really great to learn with you and grow with you and see you grow.
I'm always changing up what
I know
I'm
you
doing.
are. It's fantastic. I love watching it, and I love seeing your commitment to the learning.
I always wonder, though, how my students feel, Alexa, because it's always like, okay, we're on a new train now, riding a new train. I know that thing I was doing before. We're going to be bringing some of those train cars with us, too. But essentially, toot, toot, we're going in a different direction now.
Well, we come to expect it. Ooh, what's Heather doing now?
I mean, do I seem flaky, or does it seem like a fun journey that we're on?
I think it seems like a fun journey, but
Okay,
I do
good.
the same thing to my people. So, I'm like, okay, guys, we're on the osteo train now.
I know
Ooh,
somebody
we're
was
on the
just asking
animal
me the other day. They were like,
communication.
"Does she still do body talk?" Because it's like you're on. Yeah, I know. I mean, you've got a lot of tools in your tool belt, and you still bring them all to the surface at different times when you're doing different body work. But of course, right now you're like diving deep into the osteopath, and of course
Yeah.
that's where you're gonna explore. And I mean, that's how I do things too, right? So it's like I bring tools from previous. I was even thinking the other day because I was like reading a book and it just sort of it was a horse training book, but it reminded me. I was like, oh yeah, I used to study like that style of training so many years ago, and it was John Lyon's style of training, and I was like, am I still using elements that I had learned then in my current training, which is like so far removed from that? And I realized, yes, in fact I am, and I don't think that we ever aren't using some aspect of something that we learned, and I think of it as like layering. So I think the more cool stuff you can learn, the more layers you have and the more you bring to the table. So it's fun. It's fun for us, even if everybody else might think we're crazy.
Going, what is she doing now?
Yeah, what is she all about? And nobody really knows. I mean, go ahead and try to put a label on Alexa Linton. You can't. And same with me. It's like people are saying, oh, she's a Liberty trainer, but wait a second, she's doing this academic stuff in Europe. What is that? And now I'm on like another train, as I was talking to you about before. And people are having trouble digesting that too. They're like, so what? We're doing this now?
Yeah, what's the new, I mean,
Okay,
I
new train.
kind of know,
Yeah,
but
you
tell me
kind of
about
know.
tell us about the new train.
New train. Okay, so was it 3 or 4 years ago? I can't remember now. I like winter. I like to do winter experiments in horse training,
Mhm.
and or art. Maybe I should just say I like to do winter experiments because I feel like it's like the time to dive deep into new subjects because things slow down a little bit in the world, and I kind of go into a little bit of hibernation study mode. And so like 3 or 4 years ago, I started combining more positive reinforcement training into the work that I was doing. I had recently started more of my academic art of writing work, but I was bringing the clicker out at the same time, and then I was just clicking for good things. I was really taking advantage of marking good moments in the work that I was doing, and I wanted to see, how what the horses do with this, and I didn't say with the Liberty, how would they take this? And I loved it. It gave me like an extra
Mhm.
piece of communication that took some of the mystery out of it for the horse because then they knew the exact thing that I liked. But I still didn't I would still say I didn't go too deep down the positive reinforcement train or rabbit hole
Mhm.
or whatever.
Mhm. Mhm.
And now this year's experiment is to go and dive much deeper into the different methods within positive reinforcement training. And I have to say, I'm really enjoying it. And I'm loving some of the things that I'm discovering about it, which maybe the regular positive reinforcement people will be like, well, duh, Heather, of course. But for
Mhm.
me, there's some really neat things about actually like making horses more responsible for their own work and their own learning, which is something that I wasn't thinking about in terms of positive reinforcement training. And also discovering I'm way more of a control freak than I thought. Like I'm a Liberty trainer, so I thought like I was really easygoing, but as it turns out, I'm still super controlling, Alexa. So we could dive deep into
Oh
both of those
God.
aspects.
Oh. Well, I
Do you
mean,
want to share your most recent lesson with me? Do you
oh
want to
my
talk about
gosh.
it?
Well, Heather was there. Heather was there watching this train wreck, but and the train wreck being me, everyone.
No,
That's what the train wreck
it
was. But
wasn't, but I like you sharing the vulnerability here, and I will too.
right.
So you get to go first, and then I'm going to share.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, well I mean it would be really interesting to get like both of our perspectives on this because we were both there, we're both witnessing. I trailered Raven in my new trailer, everyone, over to Heather's, and of course, new space, new horses, new stuff going on. So she's more distracted, more, kind of engaged with other stuff than normal. Um, and Raven's like an interesting gal because I mean, we've been trying to kind of unpack it, Heather and I. It's like, is she shut down? Is she just kind of interested in everything else? Regardless, what it looked like was uh, Raven just sticking her head over the fence and ignoring me completely. And of course, we were at Liberty, and yeah, it was entirely frustrating, and my control freak came up big time because I wanted her to do things. I did jump up and down with the target in my hand a few times like a ridiculous person.
I liked how
And
you waved it around, hoping that waving it around would somehow make it on her radar.
didn't help, everybody, didn't help.
You
But
just look
yeah,
like one of the ferry people. You know, one of the people that controls like the ferries and the cars on the ferries. I call them the ferry folk. I mean, here we live on the island, everyone. So
yeah,
we got a lot of ferry folk. That's
I
what you
was
look like.
hoping you meant like FAIRY.
No, I know you were hoping for that. I mean, and you are one of those type of fairy folk as well, but no, this is like the
Yep,
BC fairies, the big boat
totally.
folk. And like if they are also controlling they're controlling where the cars are going and they're waving their like little
They are
brightly
totally
colored
waving.
things
Oh my
and
god.
trying to tell the cars where to go. And that was kind of you in that moment.
That was me.
Yep.
That was me. It did not help. And oh my god, I can't shake that image now. That's hilarious. Everybody has to come to Vancouver Island when you can, so you can see the fairy folk in action.
Yes.
I would probably be really good at that job. But yeah, so this was what was happening, and yeah, being with the like less is more, and also seeing how much Heather caught me out, because Raven would turn and touch the target, and I would click her, and then I would walk backwards. I would basically ask her to walk towards me. I couldn't just take like her turning and touching the target as the you know the stretch for her, and reward her for that. There was always this like, yeah, you did that, but also you need to do this. So you caught me in that piece as well, which was definitely eye opening for me. Yeah,
And I
yeah.
know that it was like a little when I gave you that story about my experience of many horses that are distracted with their people, the horses that kind of like don't seem to be there. And when I said that they usually belong to the just one, what did I call it? The
Yeah,
just one more thing
I think it
people?
was that. Yeah, just one
Yeah.
more thing.
And those are they're always well-meaning people in my experience. I'm not talking about people who put a ton of pressure on horses or anything like that. Like that's not what I'm saying. But it's always when somebody is just like, I just would like one more thing from the horse. And it could even be like something easy, but it's like just one more thing. And horses, they'll catch you out on that. They always notice when you want just one more thing. And
Mhm.
those are the horses that I find are like, okay, like she's hard to satisfy. So I'll just put my attention over here and I won't be
Yeah.
so present. And you, I think, very bravely, you even mentioned that in like your Instagram post like the next day or whatever. And like you really owned it. So you didn't take it in a bad way. Like you took it in a really like constructive way. And I think did a nice job with it actually.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a humbling lesson, like I shared with um a person today. It's like these particular lessons lately with Raven have been like almost more of a like a therapy session for me than anything else. I think it's really kind of unpacking the part of me that wants to control, wants to do more, wants to get more, wants to push. Like I noticed the part of me that wants to just be like, okay, I'm gonna move her feet,
Yeah. Yeah, you wanted to
and
really like slip back into that more
yep,
like horsemanship style
totally,
of work with her, making the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard. You
yep.
wanted to go there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a habit for me. So, it's a real, once again, yeah, the layer. I love that concept of the layering, right? Because I think both you and I can look back and be like, there we've taken pieces of like everything that we've done, and we've sort of like really mined the gold, like what's the value here. There's value in everything. Like I look back at my kines degree, and there was even value there, and like all the way through, kind of what can I thread through that's actually brings a lot of value, brings a lot of nuance to the work, so we get more and more skilled at that. So that's kind of what I'm seeing there, is like, okay, this is, it's not like we're throwing out everything, but
But
what's kind of
sometimes
the
those things come up and bite you because they're like a layer you need to
yeah,
shed a little bit, right? That's like
totally,
either muscle
totally,
memory or
yeah,
just memory, and you may even know in your mind, hey, that particular style of training in this particular moment may not serve me the best. Doesn't mean it won't serve you at another time,
yeah,
but maybe it's not the best now, but because it's so ingrained, it's
yeah,
like your go-to,
yeah.
and sometimes that's a little hard to let go of.
Ooh,
And I know for myself, because I wanted to share also, after you had that experience, that I brought okay, so I'm diving more into the positive reinforcement, like I said. But what I realized is I was trying to always give so much direction in everything I was doing with the horses. So if we use something like mat work, like stationary mat work, just having the horse stand on a mat, which looks like ground
yeah,
tying for more horsemanship people. Um, if I said, that I wanted the horse on the mat and they've got their feet on the mat and I click and treat them, but then they moved off the mat, I immediately wanted to correct them in some way. And it wouldn't necessarily be that I wanted to correct them in like a pressure way or something like that, but I immediately wanted to find ways to guide them back to the mat and like kind of
Yep.
micromanage the whole scenario. And then what I started to realize is the horse can find their own damn way to the mat. Like they get rewarded when they're on the mat. I don't have to correct every time they get off the
Yeah.
mat. I just
Yeah.
need to stand there relaxed and let them find their way back, because as long as I reinforce the mat properly and I make the mat a good enough place, they're going to keep coming back to the mat. And then they actually became, as I trained that, they became more responsible for their own groundedness staying on the mat. And I wasn't the one who was saying, okay, move your legs here and be there and go here and go there. I just had to be calm and I just had to relax. And the other day I brought Extra out and she did the same thing that Raven did, because I realized, okay, I'm gonna like just bring Extra out. And usually Extra's like super connected and does all sorts of stuff with me. And I mean, even in weird scenarios where I've taken her to demonstrations. But Alexa, I've always had my dressage whip before. and so this time I was like, okay, not having the dressage whip, just me. Just
Uh-huh.
me and my treat bag. And the neighbors were doing something interesting, and Extra's very nosy. And so she went over, did what Raven did. She stared over the fence and she was like staring at the neighbors. And without anything to kind of back up my like, hey, Extra, get over here and like, let's do something together, it turned out I didn't count for anything. She would rather stare over the fence. And if I gave it like this thing where, okay, now I'm not going to be like cueing her, I'm not going to be like correcting, I'm not going to be managing this. I'm either just going to be more reinforcing than the neighbors and more interesting and more fun than the neighbors, or I'm not. It turned out I'm not. I'm not more interesting.
It's hard. That is such a hard thing to come to. Like, that's what I realized the other day, I think, was like that was like the part of my ego that went, damn it, like I'm really goddamn boring. Like at the end of the day, like
But is it boring, or is it like what I was thinking? I was like, okay, I count for nothing. I'm down in the polls. She's not voting for me right now.
yeah,
And then I
totally.
was like, okay, of course, past me might have been like, hey, Extra, like, get your butt over here, please.
Yeah.
I might have made a bit of a scene about it, which doesn't mean I'd put a ton of pressure on her, but I would do something, right? But it
Yeah.
would be pressury. It would be an expectation. And this time I decided, nope, Heather, you were either more positive and more reinforcing than the neighbors, or you're not. And like we decided, I wasn't, or shall I say, Extra decided that I wasn't. But I
Mhm.
realized
Mhm.
it wasn't maybe that I was so boring as much as that it was like all the past stuff. She was like, you know what, Heather? I don't like to do the things that you like to do as much as you think that I might like to do them. Now that you don't have a way to back it up, the neighbors, they're more interesting. And so it was more about,
Mhm.
I think, past stuff, and I
Yeah.
need to unpack that. Whereas with somebody like Sailor, we don't have so much past history. Like almost all of his history
Yep.
is positive. And
Yep.
so he doesn't look at the neighbors, right? Like
Yep.
he doesn't lose interest. He's like right there.
Yep.
But even with him, with the positive reinforcement, what I'm learning is like he gets like too keen. We know that about him. And so then he can
Yes.
get kind of like rushy. So if I take him as an example, and let's say I'm wanting to do like leading work at Liberty, he would tend to want to go too fast. He'd want to bring his energy up. And in the past, I would have always corrected that. So whether I corrected that with some sort of signal, some sort of cue, or whether I corrected that with bringing the whip out in front or whatever, I would do something to kind of manage his speed. And now what I'm experimenting with is, wait a second, I don't need to manage his speed. I just need to reward him when he's in the right place. And I need to completely ignore him when he's in the wrong position. And now
Mhm.
he's adjusting himself. So now he gets too fast, he stops, he backs up. I do nothing. I just walk calmly ahead. And he's learning how to regulate himself. And I'm like, ooh, that's cool. So
That
I'm
is
really
cool.
enjoying that. aspect of it because I now don't need to manage him anymore. I have a lot less of a job now, but my job is just to recognize when he's in a great spot, reward him for it, and I should say reward him often enough that he really understands where his spot is and that it's reinforcing enough that it's like clear and it's a good place to be.
Yeah.
But it's really powerful watching him fix himself instead of
Oh,
I
I
don't have
like
to do it.
that.
I can relax. But that is one of the hardest things for me. I
Oh,
want to like signal him. I want to be like, slow down, sailor, even if it means I'm like picking up a hand or something. But then I realized I was just controlling the whole scenario too much.
yep.
And now that I've let go, he's doing it. He's fixing himself. And like, that's really cool to me because now I'm like, who learns faster? Like an animal that's being corrected by me, even if it's a friendly way, or an animal who decides to correct himself?
Yeah. And is doing it because he's like, ooh, I want the good stuff. I
Yeah.
want to, yeah. Yeah, it's so amazing. One of the things I'm working on is I've had this lovely realization this past couple of weeks. So I just got myself a trailer, and so I started being like, okay, I'm gonna like load up the girls, we're gonna do our thing. It was all very romantic of me.
You had a
Ray,
vision. There was a
I had this
sunrise.
vision. Just so you all know, my horses are giant, and fitting them both in this trailer is like a bit of a thing. So we'll see how that all goes. But uh Raven goes in pretty nice, um and she's pretty happy in there, getting more and more so. But Diva, I realized as I started to load her up, I've kind of, because I haven't really had a trailer, and some of you might, have this experience. It's like, when the trailer comes, it's like you got to get in. There's not a lot of time to actually work with it, and I realized as I took the pressure off Diva and I didn't let myself use my whip anymore, and I like and I wouldn't use it hard, but I would just like encourage, and it's still pressure, and I would, yeah, like, you know ask with the rope and things like that. Like, I've recognized that she is pretty clear that she like does not want to go in, especially if there's not another horse in. And
Right.
so it's just been this real reality check. It's like my 21-year-old horse. So I was like, yeah, she goes in the trailer, like it's fine. When I really take all the pressure off and just let her decide, is like, no thanks,
Not going on this trip.
I don't want to go in there. And it's been really cool actually, because I've sort of gone, okay, like I've kind of created a bit of a traumatic thing in some ways, and I just sort of sat back and I just sat in the trailer and let her come over and sniff me and like sniff around, and we just took our time, like it was not a big deal. And then the other day she got in, stood in there for a little bit, ate really nice, like just chilled out. And it's been, and without any like pulling, pushing, making any of that. And I was like, huh, fancy that,
Fancy that. She went in
fancy
on her
that.
own.
Right? And I'm sure some listeners out there are gonna be like, Alexa, like, why did it take you so long to figure this out? And I get that thought, but I think
But that's one of
there's
those things,
others.
Alexa, where you have like this whole there's always gonna be somebody listening who's like, oh, for crying out loud, why waste your time with that? Just tell the horse to get in the trailer. And
Oh,
then there's another
totally.
person who's going to be like, of course, Alexa, why didn't you try that years ago? I can't believe you didn't. And then there's everybody in between, right? Like we're
Yeah,
all gonna be on the scale, and I think that's one of the most challenging things about horse training is like deciding where you're going to be on the scale today. And both of us are
totally.
experimenting right now with going further towards less pressure, less expectation, and seeing what that unveils, right? What it opens up. So that's where we're
Yeah.
at. There's
That it seems to be where we're both at right now. Because I'm kind of, yeah, I think there's this question mark around like, how does one engage when there isn't that, you know that kind of coercion, so to speak,
Well, and I
around
think about
behavior.
my kitty. Okay, so my kitty, he loads up in his kennel, no problem, every time I want him to load up in the kennel. So we are frequently going to my parents. I'm actually at my parents right now because my loft apartment's under construction, and there's way more heat here at my parents than there is at my loft.
Mhm.
So we're just frequently going back and forth. So almost every day there's like 2 kennel rides, right? He gets in the kennel no problem. I don't have to give him treats or anything to get in the kennel. He goes because he likes to be at home at my house. It's a good place to be, and he likes to be at my parents'. There's no reason for him not to get in the kennel. He's always just enjoyed wherever he's going every single time. And so it's just a positive scenario. I don't have to stuff
Mhm.
him in there.
Mhm.
He enjoys it. He goes on his own. I just say, "Come on, Liam, time to go." And boom, off he is into the kennel and away we go. Now, what's he going to think after he gets neutered in a couple of weeks? I'm not really sure. But right now, it's always been positive for him to go for a trip.
Yeah. Yeah. And we look at a lot of horses in terms of trailering. It's not always positive, right? It's like,
No.
I know for Diva there's been times where, it's like, okay, you got to get in here, and no ifs, ands, or buts, and that is because, like, it's absolutely necessary that she goes somewhere. But I think people can relate to that, right? It's like there's times when you can kind of mosey and take your time, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, however long it takes, and then yeah, there's these different times. So yeah, I mean, for you with your horses, kind of, it sounds like you're kind of taking it back to the foundation, so to speak,
Yeah, and I'm
like.
like putting new
Mhm.
foundations in, I would say, because like say one of the things that's always annoyed me about positive reinforcement training when I see it is that the horses are too jazzed up. They're like too motivated to the point that they're really not listening. They're not grounded. Um, and so I'm trying to pay attention to like really keeping it relaxed so that that's my number one foundation is that the horse is relaxed and also that I'm not giving too many signals. I'm letting them work things out, but without like trying a million things all the time. Like, hopefully, I've made it clear enough, whatever it is that we're working on, that they're not feeling like they need to try every possible thing. Of course, Sailor's the
Mhm.
most notorious for like trying 10 things before he pays attention to what I was asking him. But if I really like peel that back and I really like focus on the relaxation piece and say that might mean something like at the beginning we work on him standing on the mat while I'm grooming him and that he's staying there while I'm going back and forth to get brushes and he's choosing to stay there. But if I make my focus peeling back to the foundation of like relaxation and him just standing quietly, that then I can come back to that in the other work that we're doing. So, and say something like leading work that I can focus on, say him targeting me, that he's in the right position, but he's not just in the
Mhm.
right position, but he's actually relaxed in that position, like floppy ears, nice relaxed head position. And then if I really make that my focus, but that does mean peeling it back. That does mean really taking it back to basics. And I know that I certainly know from other style training, if I focus on whatever the basic is, the advanced stuff will come easy. But can I tell you how frustrating it is right now that I'm just like walking around the arena like one or two or at the most 5 steps at a time before I have to stop or like before I have to reward because I realize that I need to give some direction. So if anybody comes to the side of the arena right now to watch, they're literally just seeing me wandering around feeding a horse every few steps. Like there's nothing happening. Nothing.
And
And
I
yet
think
magic
that
is happening at the same
magic is
time.
happening. Magic is happening. I interviewed Elsa Sinclair the other day, and some of you might have listened to our podcast together, but this is exactly what she was talking about. It's like seeing the small things, like working with the like this like see like really working with the nuance that's there. And she was joking. She said, like, my this training method that I have is the slowest training method in the world.
But like my theory, of course, is that this is going to be like in the same way that like in the academic work, if you focus on a brilliant stop and a brilliant go, and like say just a brilliant move the shoulders, brilliant move the haunches, you got the tools for like
Yeah.
your shoulder in, your haunches in, all this fancy stuff. And if ever your fancy stuff goes awry, it's really just because you were missing something like the most brilliant light stop in the world, right? So it's just about the stop. Well, I think it's the same thing here. If I just really focus on this relaxation piece that my horse is thinking on its own, but at the same time really relaxed and knows exactly what we're working on and finds their own way there, like to that spot. So if I use leading as an example, if I'm talking about Sailor, well, his job is to just target where I am to keep his head, equal to where I am, but to do it in like a really relaxed way. Like I'm looking for him to be completely relaxed. And he always did seem quite relaxed when I was doing it with my whip. But then I was also making corrections and now I'm not. So now it's his job to do the same thing. But I think if he can do that, then he's going to be able to do the fancy stuff too. And he's going to be able to
Mm.
do it from a relaxed place. And if I think of somebody like Titus, who you and I both work with, and he's a real powerhouse, jazzed up, a lot of energy, Frasian cross thoroughbred. So teaching him to just like regulate his energy and his emotions, that's going to be so fundamental to him in absolutely everything that he does. Because like he's got a history of being explosive under saddle and everything, and he's at my place for some rehab and some retraining. That's the thing
Yeah.
I need to take the time on. If I take the time on that, my theory is that the rest should go pretty easy.
Yeah, and set him up for success in the rest of his endeavors. Yeah.
But anybody
Yeah, for
watching
sure.
might be like, really? What is she doing? Because, like, for the first 2 weeks there before his surgery, I was just focusing in the arena on teaching him how to, like, stand quietly next to me, lower his head, and just stand there and be very peaceful, not be, like, frozen, but just be like relaxed and not trying to like not be like tense, not asking me for treats or whatever, but just to be present, to be calm. And I taught him how to do things like go to targets because he's a high-headed guy, like looking around and lots of big energy. So I would like use the target to bring his energy back down because that would like lower his head and give him
Yep.
focus. So we were doing a lot of like going from stationary target to stationary target, like cone to cone. I did a lot of handheld target stuff, like showing him, okay, here's where I need you to be, because he wasn't allowed to come out of a walk because of his bone chip. So he had to stay quiet. So I was trying to give him the tools for how to be quiet. But I think that will pay off in dividends later when we have to do fancier work. At least this is what I'm hoping.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the
And I
plan.
mean, yeah, he subsequently has had his surgery, which was super successful, and those skills. I mean, he was a superstar for his stall rest. Like such a superstar.
He was fantastic in his stall rest. And then today, his very first day out of stall rest, there was no explosiveness. There was no running around. There was no, woohoo, I'm in the paddock. He just came out into the paddock. He looked around. I, of course, had food placed in strategic
Yeah.
locations to give him some focus. And I was out there with him. But it sort of brought it back to the same work that we had been doing in the arena. And
Yeah.
because of that, he just kept his emotions super chill, super calm, and then he just had a nap in the sunshine and he was totally
Yeah.
fine. So he's, this young energetic horse who's stuck in a stall for 2 weeks, and he came out, moseyed around, had a nap. And I think a lot of
Totally.
that was because of the work, yeah, that we had been doing
Yeah.
on his emotional control. And then we did do a class like this afternoon together because he wanted one. He was asking for one when I was actually putting food out for the other horses, and he showed me by like doing his backup because he was came to me also as like food aggressive. So one of the very first things that I taught him was back up and then I'll put your food in.
Yep.
So now he also likes to just kind of do the moonwalk across his pen or his stall in the hopes that I'll throw him something. And also he knows how to go find his mat because like I have a mat that I toss into his pen or his stall and then he goes and finds it. But he used to like massively paw at the mat. There was like all this like angst and all this energy, and he'd paw and kick mat around. But now he knows, no, 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 don't go pawing it. Just go stand on it quietly. And when you're quiet and standing still for a while, that's where to get something. And so we practiced that today out in the pen. And yeah, he really enjoys that kind of work, and he's really smart about it. Like, you could move that mat, or he might move it because he still sometimes kicks it around, and then he knows how to go find it and stand on it quietly. And I think that's going to pay off for him in other places, like even
Oh
in,
yeah.
mounting and things like that, because he's got anxiety, I guess, about saddling and that kind of thing, which we're also going
Yeah.
to be going on to.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and I mean, I had a really good giggle when his mom messaged me. He'd been on a week and a half of stall rest, and she said, Heather just sent me this message about Titus. And it was when he escaped from his stall
Oh yeah.
a week and a half into stall rest. And you were like, oh my God, you were in a lesson, and you ran to his assistance, and he'd literally like walked 7 feet to the next door stall to the feed room,
Oh yeah. Yep.
um
That's
and
where his
went
mind
on a
took him.
grand adventure, really, you know.
Yeah, because I saw him out in the aisle. Hey, like I was teaching Dean at the time, and I saw Titus out in the aisle, and I had like a total meltdown, panic attack, because I thought, oh no, like he could go running out into my courtyard, and then he could go running out into one of the pastures. And this is
Yeah.
a horse who's had surgery. He's got the wrap on his leg. He's not supposed to be going anywhere. And he did like wander down the barn aisle, looked around, and then he wandered back and went into the feed room. And I just went in the feed room, put his halter on, and stuck him back in his stall. And I have figured out how he breaks out, because he's now actually broken the stall guard 3 times, and
Mm-hmm.
it's always in an altercation with Whimsy, because Whimsy's on the other side of the aisle, and she leans her
Mm-hmm.
giant giraffe neck over, and she wants to flirt with him, and so he has his long giraffe neck, and then they like touch noses in the aisle, and then there's like a squealing match that happens,
Yeah.
and in that moment he busts the stall guard
Yeah, I
clip.
mean, he is 17 too.
Yes, and so
So
just leaning on it, he just breaks it. But he doesn't like go running out, because he's actually broken it 3 times now. The other 2 times he didn't even move. He just stayed in his stall after he broke it. And that one time he just wandered out and went to the feed room. Yeah.
oh my goodness. Yeah, yeah. He's a pretty cool guy. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm really excited to kind of see where you two go together. And yeah, I'm glad that he's in your care here. So we're talking about this idea of like, I don't know, this simplifying, which is challenging. And I know, things have shifted, COVID and all, you're not going to Europe when you normally would, like
Oh, I should be there
thing
now. I was
you
supposed
should
to
be
be.
there now.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so that I think you're still bringing in a lot of the academic art of writing stuff, but like how is that all coming together right now for
Oh, well,
you?
that is a good question. And I absolutely am still using it. And because I love it, I love everything about it. And so my exciting plan, and I know that there's others who do this, so this isn't that I'm not the only person who does it, but is to be able to bring more positive reinforcement into my academic work, to like meld them together. And so something cool that's happening with, say, Sky, my other training horse. So Sky is also with me, and he's got a back injury, so he's just doing groundwork rehabilitation, and I was working him in groundwork position. So that's when we walk backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And when we walk backwards, our really goal is to be able to have that horse be really balancing itself. And then, we work towards the side movements and everything. But the very first piece is the speed control piece. So the first piece is that the horse is balancing themselves enough that they don't start pushing you,
Mm-hmm.
the person that's
Mm-hmm.
walking backwards, which is
Mm-hmm.
difficult for a horse, because of course when we walk backwards they're kind of naturally drawn to follow you. That's your drawing energy, but you're asking the horse to rebalance. Now normally what I would do in that case, I don't want to take weight into my hand, because I want them to have a nice long relaxed neck, and I usually work the cavesson. So I would tap them in the chest with the whip to say, please keep your body back and put more weight onto your hindquarters, balance yourself as we walk. And that's like one of the number one and first exercises that I would do with the horse. And I'd do that on a like fairly loose line. And so then I was like, well, how the hell am I going to do that with positive reinforcement training? And I was trying to figure out like different markers and different like targeting and stuff. And then what I discovered is I didn't need to make it so complicated. All I needed to do was reward Sky when he was balancing himself. So anytime it says that I've lost connection, can you hear me still?
I can, but maybe let's just wait for a second.
Okay, because it says it's attempting to reconnect. But if you can hear me,
I can hear you.
So all I had to do was reward him. I had to click him every time he backed himself off and rebalanced himself, slowed himself down, stopped himself from pushing, and got into the position that I wanted him to have with his head and neck really relaxed and soft out in front of me. And when I was clicking and rewarding for that, and that may mean that I am clicking and rewarding him really often so that he can't even get his push up. Like maybe we only go a couple of steps, or maybe I do a turn so that he kind of has to rebalance himself. But as soon as I started clicking and rewarding him for being in the correct position for backing off, backing himself off, rebalancing, then he started finding his own position and his own balance. I merely had to point out to him when I liked it. So I made like my single criteria any time that he backed off me. So maybe that meant that he did a full stop. Maybe that meant he just did a half halt. Anything, or maybe it just meant that he found his position right in front of me. But whatever he did that backed himself off, I just had to click and reward that. And then what I really discovered is, man, he can do this himself. I just have to point out the moment that I want. So I don't have to be tapping him to correct him and show him that. I just have to reward the times that he actually does it. So now he's actually working on himself and rebalancing himself. I'm not doing it. And I actually think that's more powerful than me correcting him. Because I thought, like, how's he going to learn faster? Is he going to learn faster when I tell him, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, and then occasionally rewarding him for when he gets it right? Or is he going to get it faster when every time he gets it, like, I'm like, yay, you're a superstar, yay, you're a superstar, and I make it reinforcing enough and easy enough that he can be a star, but that maybe means that it's like painstakingly slow at this stage. But then today he had his second session doing that particular exercise, and he was really backing himself off. He was half halting himself, and I didn't have to do it for him. And I thought, ooh, cool. So I can see how that could work towards more advanced work, because if that's my very first prerequisite is the horse's rebalancing and speed control, well, that's going to work up to more advanced work as well.
I really like that, because I do find one of the traps that I fall into with the academic stuff is like I get, to like overcorrecting. Like I'm constantly like, move this shoulder, like there's like I feel like a conductor.
Yes, very micromanaging, and even if you're doing it in a very, I mean, I like to think for the most part, I usually do it in a fairly kind way. I get the horse pretty light on the aids, but it's still very micromanaging. Whereas if I put that into Sky's hooves, so to speak, if it's his job to do it for himself, because that leads to the rewards that he wants, I think he's actually learning it better than if I'm sitting there just micromanaging the whole scenario and then occasionally rewarding what I like.
Amazing.
I mean, it's an experiment. Amazing. I mean, it is an experiment right now. And maybe there's some listeners who would be like, it's not an experiment, it's a fact. And maybe there's other listeners who would be like, this isn't going to work in the long run. I don't know. But like for me, it's an experiment and it's unveiling itself, because I am watching him literally rebalance himself, and I'm not having to say something to him about that. I watch him do it, and then I tell him, yes, Guy, exactly, good job, you got it. But I do try to make that easier for him at certain points. Like if he starts to get out of balance, then maybe I make a turn where I know he's going to have to slow down to make the turn. And then as soon as I see him slow down, then I click and reward that. Or like I said, I do it so painstakingly slowly that he hasn't had time to get out of position. So maybe he only makes it 2 steps before I reward him, because I'm like, yeah, those 2 steps were well balanced. Those 2 steps were good. But I can see how I can build that, because for sure it's working in the leading work with Sailor. He's like slowing himself down. I'm getting longer and longer steps, longer time of relaxation. And I had it before, when I was doing kind of my erratic positive reinforcement, where I did it more rare, but then I had the whip and I had my signals, and so it was like my signals were slowing Sailor down, so it was different because then I was using all these signals to rebalance Sailor and tell him, hey, please stay in your position. Now I've abandoned the signals, and Sailor's doing the same thing Sky's doing. Sailor is literally, sometimes he'll stop because he gets going too fast because he's got a lot of push in his hind legs. He'll stop and he'll actually back himself up, and he won't be all tense about it because he tends to be a little bit of a, well, he's a little soldier on his own, and he will actually be relaxed. He'll be like, no, I have to be relaxed, so I'm just gonna have floppy ears, and Heather she'll reward me. And then I do, but there's no time that I'm like, Sailor, you need to slow down. Sailor, you need to slow down. Sailor, you need to slow down. Even however well-meaning and how nice I did it before. And sometimes I was strict with him too. But now I'm just like, nope, he's got to do it himself. And he's like, oh, I can see him. He's like, oh, I've got out of position. And then he gets himself in. So I think that's very powerful. I'm excited about it.
That's very cool. I really like that. And yeah, I want to, well, when we finally maybe get out of Liberty engaging stuff with Raven.
No, I've got goals. I've got plans. Friday.
Maybe a while.
I did have success, by the way, with Extra the other day when I did have the neighbor situation where she was just obsessed with what the neighbors were doing. And she really does love construction, like any kind of construction. Just
Raven too
loves it. Yeah, totally. But I did, like, all I had to do was every time she brought her to, and again, I didn't make a scene about it. So, like, how in our lesson, you were waving the target, but also there was a lot of like asking her to look at the target. So there was, and I would now say that's more correcting than I would want to do. Right. So instead, what I did with Extra is I didn't ask her to look at the target. I just stood there and was like, okay, this is cool. I also love to look at construction. That's fine. But every time she did bring her attention to me, then I rewarded her. So I didn't ask her for attention. I treated it the same way that I've been treating these other situations, like the leading work and like the groundwork. I just rewarded her whenever I was like, okay, I can be reinforcing enough that she's like, oh, Heather's not asking for anything. But if I choose to pay attention to her, then there's something good. And then that took like that one more piece, like that expectation out of it. Yeah. And then she actually started paying more attention to me. Then she started going, you know what, Heather's actually kind of cool. She doesn't want anything from me, but man, she's giving out the treats, so that's cool. And then she knows what to do. I mean, she knows all sorts of amazing things. So I didn't ask her to do anything beyond that. I just decided, no, just keep it really simple today. If she chooses to pay attention, I will be reinforcing. If she doesn't choose to pay attention, she's getting her own kind of reinforcement by staring at the neighbors. I just have to be present. And then she just started paying more and more attention to me. It just happened organically. And then from there, I just like gave her end of session reward and then put her away and decided, well, that was about enough. I mean, that was about enough that I could handle, because I was like, oh, we're really stripped it back now. I mean, we were working on all sorts of fancy things before. Now we're working on bring the horse's attention back from the neighbor. Get a treat.
Yeah, totally right.
But I was like, I felt a little naked. I was a little stripped of my tools there, Alexa.
Yeah. And I think this is the question, is like, what happens when we put all that stuff away, right? Like when we don't use those things, when we, I mean, yeah, it's interesting to see that, like what engagement, what connection is there when those things aren't there. And I know the other day I had like this really brilliant like moment with Diva where it was kind of out of the blue, and I had gone out to try to play with Raven, and Raven was like, okay, whatever. Like, she wasn't overly engaged. She was kind of engaged. But Diva was like, yes, please. And we were out in the paddock, and she was like trotting over poles at Liberty and like doing like just like this beautiful positioning and sliding stops and back. Like, it was crazy. And I'm like, who are you? And she,
that was cool.
I was using my like really nummy like crunchy apple treats, and she was stoked. She was like, I will do all these things, if we can, at the end of this, like, we can negotiate some treats into the bargain. Like, she was pretty happy about it. I mean, Diva's, we've spent a while on this connection, and so it was pretty cool. And I mean, she loves like snuggles, and she has other rewards that she's really into, but she's not normally the one that's like gonna go over the poles,
Right,
and
not gonna go that extra mile.
not really. But she was like, I was sending her around like an obstacle, and like, asking her over like a little trot pole line and
Well, I
stuff.
think that stuff starts to come in though, because like my Whimsy is the same age as your Diva, right?
Yeah,
And again, like
yeah,
same like long standing history. I've had Whimsy her entire life, right? And
yeah,
same kind of thing. But I've been now doing, I think it's 2 months of only positive reinforcement with
yeah,
Whimsy.
yeah,
And so yeah, she's offering a lot of energy now. Like she likes to practice canter transitions and
yeah,
her side movements, and she's offering a lot more than she ever did before, but I'm actually having to temper that down, and I'm realizing, oops, I maybe missed. I mean, I did some of the relaxation pieces, but then I got so excited, like bringing her up in her energy, and I was like so surprised that she was offering all this stuff and offering the energy, and I was like really excited about it because she had always been like a less motivated horse of my
yeah,
horses.
totally,
And then she was so
totally.
motivated, and I was like really stoked on it, and it was great. And then I realized, oh, I actually have to go back a little bit to that relaxation piece and make sure that like I can
Yep,
bring it in and interject it inside of when she does get like high energy and excited, because it'll bring that extra quality to it. But it was really super exciting to watch how she transformed, like how she started bringing the energy up. Because initially, even if I asked her for a trot transition and I didn't have my whip, she was like, what? What are you trying to say? Like,
yeah, yeah,
what do
yeah,
you mean? And then when she started realizing, oh, you get reinforcement for going faster, then she started being really excited about it, and then offering more things like what Diva's doing. And so I was like, oh, well, that's really powerful, because now she's excited about offering these things and not resenting it or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but at the same time, I'm starting to realize now, foundation piece. She's getting a little too excited about it, and not that she doesn't like mug me for treats or anything. Like, where I've always been really clear with her about that, but it's more that she starts to bring like too much. Like,
yeah,
I don't like her to bring like too much tension in when she's, even if she's doing something like a canter transition. I want her to stay relaxed in the canter transition,
yep,
and she's
yep.
starting to bring a little too much. Like, yeah, we're doing it. Then we're gonna do this, and I'm like, wait, whoa. Still want to
Oh
be,
my gosh.
like kind of. I want to know what we're gonna be working on, and I want it to be relaxed, and so yeah.
So funny. I remember like meeting a gal a long time ago, and I think she was probably doing something like academic work, like classical training. And I remember her saying like my horse's best years were like their 20s and 30s. And I was like, really? Because it's this like crazy myth in horses that, horses are old by the time they're, you know, 19 or 20. And I look at our mares and I'm like, oh my God, they're
They're
just getting
just
started
getting
here.
started. They're in like their best work ever. Like Whimsy's starting to offer
Absolutely.
something that I'm like, oh, we're gonna be doing canter pirouette at Liberty
Yeah.
probably within a year.
Yeah.
She's getting it. Like she's coming around from the outside, rain aid so nice, but now I'm using my target to do it. So I get like
Yeah.
her to target her withers, and she brings her withers towards me, and she loves her canter transit. Like, she loves her canter. She goes crazy for this gait. I don't know why. And I'm walking next to her, and she's like really starting to sit and really starting to lift up the front. And I'm like, man, Whimsy, like she's gonna be 22 in June, and she does have
Yeah.
some soundness troubles,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yeah.
And she's gonna be doing canter pirouettes. I can see it.
Oh,
I can feel
totally.
it, and she loves it
Totally.
because she feels like this powerhouse superstar when she does this kind of work. And she's just like, yes, I've got it. But she's almost, like I said, a little too excited right now. But that's okay. I can temper that back down. I can work with that. So it's exciting.
It is exciting. Yeah, Diva, I think I think they're the same age. Yeah, Diva's like going to be 22 in May. So
And Diva
I,
looks
I just,
fantastic. She looks
yeah,
amazing.
I just made up her birthday because I don't have a freaking clue when Diva was born. She's a mystery child, but, you know, yeah, I just made it up. but yeah, she does. She looks amazing. You know, she's they both do. And I think yeah, I think that's really cool. It's just like recognizing that, you know, this stuff, like especially if you're chunking it back to the real foundation stuff, like you can, this is the stuff that really like keeps your horses happy, conditioned, well, like, you know, for the long term. I see that with Diva, like her back, you know, she's the kind of mare where you could really lose the condition in her back, you know, long back.
Yeah.
Whimsy's similar.
Yeah, Whimsy's long back.
Right. And you know, I think the academic work and this kind of work for her has like been just a saving grace for, being able, I still ride Diva quite a bit. She's super cool under saddle. And, you know, I think it's really been a big part of that for her to feel really balanced and yeah. So you know, I think it's maybe not talked about a lot, but this way of keeping our elders, um, you know, happy and healthy for a long time.
Well, and it's fun. I think they really enjoy that like
I
collection
think so
and
too.
feeling
Yeah,
strong. And I know
totally.
Whimsy really does. Like she's now competing with Sailor, like in terms of when I go into the paddock, Sailor's always trying to put on whatever halter I'm carrying, whether it's his turn or not. Even if he just had a turn, he's always trying to interfere with all the other horses and put the halter back on and go back out of the
Yep.
arena. But Whimsy's now like that too. So it's like the two of them. I always have
Mm.
Whimsy's giant moose head trying to put the halter on, and then I've got like Sailor's little head trying to put the halter on. And even Extra actually is showing more interest. She comes
Wow.
over, but I don't know if it's that she wants to put the halter on and go to the session, or if she just wants to get the cookie that the other two horses she like I think she's just trying to steal a cookie from the fact that the others are coming, but who knows. But she's getting there where she's interested. But for sure, Whimsy, she's all about it now. She's just like, take me, it's my
Yeah.
class. And that
No,
is
that's
really cool with
awesome.
Whimsy because there
Yeah.
was phases in her life where she's like, oh, please, dear God, take another horse.
Oh, totally. Totally. Yeah, that sinking feeling when you go out to the paddock and your horse just like runs in the other direction. You're like,
Mim
"Uh-oh."
never had that much energy. She was always like the least motivated horse in the world. So it was more like just like wandering slowly away.
Yeah,
But
that's kind of how Diva did it as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
but now
Yeah.
now she's actually bringing energy. I can't keep up with her walk when I'm working with her in the arena. And I
Yeah.
do think though, like my Airbnb guests, I think they think that I'm the craziest person ever because they came and they were asking for riding lessons, and I was like, no, 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 I don't teach riding lessons unless you've got your own horse. And then they've been watching me for the last month and a half, and I think they realized Heather almost never rides her horses. Like, what in the world is doing out there? She just like runs around with a pool noodle and feeds them treats, from what we can tell. And you know what? They're probably not that wrong, but I believe there's method to my madness, and I do occasionally
Absolutely.
ride them as well. But they're just too darn muddy to ride right now, anyway.
Oh my gosh, I know the feeling. I'm like, oh, the length of time I have to go to actually, like, I don't know the state of Raven when I bring her for a lesson on Friday, but it might be,
Doesn't
you know,
matter because
it
she's
really doesn't
probably going
matter.
to
We're
be
doing
staring over
Liberty
the fence, so don't worry about it, Alexa.
completely. I'm not gonna be riding, so I keep bringing my saddle, my fit saddle.
I know it's so
Uh,
optimistic of you. I loved how
it's
you showed
very
up last time
optimistic.
with the saddle and everything, and then you spent your time just sort of waving a target around, and your horse just stared over the fence and stared over the saddle, in fact, as you
She
looked
did.
at
She
it
stared
going,
right over the
oh my
saddle.
God, maybe I'm never getting to ride again. But you
Yeah.
will, Alexa, you will. But I just,
Yeah.
we're backing it
Yeah.
off a little bit right now.
Totally. Totally. It's good. I feel the foundation building is all worthwhile. And yeah, I think that's where it's at right now. I mean, you know,
Did you see
that's what
Dean's
this
target that I shared
I
on
did.
social media?
It was
So I
fantastic.
have to share with everybody now
Yeah,
that
you do.
my student
Yeah,
Dean, who Alexa brought to me actually, so thank you, Alexa, that
you are
he's got a
welcome.
little Icelandic, and he's decided to totally embrace my experimentation of the positive reinforcement training. So I, put it upon him that he needed to make his own target, and he could make it out of anything he wanted, and he shows up with a kayak paddle.
I thought that was fantastic. It was
So good.
very West Coast of him.
So West Coast, and it was raining the day that he showed up at that, and the
Yeah.
arena was full of water, and it was so appropriate that he has this kayak paddle and this little Icelandic horse, furry little horse, running after a kayak paddle.
Aw.
It was great.
Speaking of amazing elders, there's an amazing
Oh yeah,
elder
like
right there.
isn't he in his 30s?
I think he's 35. Yeah.
Yeah, that little guy's
Yeah.
going strong. And
Yeah.
yeah, he's working on all this stuff right now. And Dean is such a good sport because he just goes along with whatever crazy plan I have. So if we're doing more of like an academic style class, he does that. And if we're doing more of like a chasing a kayak paddle around, Dean goes with that. So he's a great student to have.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. There you go, everybody. Pick your own adventure.
That's
Pick
right.
your own target.
Pick your target. Pick your
Yeah,
stuff that
no
you want to
kidding.
do.
I don't know if I have a paddle around here, but I could see if I could track one down.
Well, and
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
yellow, which I just heard recently is one of the colors that horses can see really well. So Dean actually
Oh,
picked
good
a
to
perfect
know.
target.
That's fantastic. Awesome.
Whereas I use a
Um,
pool noodle on a PVC pipe. That's what I'm
I
going
know
for.
you do. That was the one that I was waving around like a fairy person the other day.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not going to forget that too soon here. Can you believe that we're out of time?
I can, because that's how we are.
Here we are.
Like we were just
59
talking
minutes and 52
about that,
seconds.
about how we could like record any conversation that we're having and call it a podcast, really.
It's really very, very true. Yeah, yeah, I do appreciate that very much about our friendship, and yeah, I appreciate your teaching and your experimentation because I think it makes us all better horse people and more curious and all of that. So thanks for what you do.
Well, thank you. And I would just
Mhm.
challenge anybody else out there just to experiment. It doesn't have to be positive reinforcement training. I just think learning is so much fun with the horses. And if you can pick like a certain, I don't know, a discipline or a style or a book or a video that like suits your fancy, just like go out there and experiment and try. Because I think that's what makes horses the most interesting for me is like when we learn this new stuff. And it doesn't even have to be like a horse thing. Like one of the things I'm working on right now, and it's going to come on my
Mhm.
social media very soon. I looked up a dog. It was a dog video. It was a clicker training video on how to teach a dog to back up. And I studied that and I decided I'm using that for horses. And Sailor is doing a fantastic job right now of following that dog video. So I
Love
think
it.
you can learn from a lot of different places.
That's awesome. Oh, little sailor. Well, I can't wait to see your whole troop on Friday. And yeah, thanks for this wonderful conversation as per usual. And yeah, thanks for making us all laugh. And being
Well,
here and being down the road.
yeah, well, and
I
thanks to
appreciate it.
everybody who's made it this far listening to this podcast.
Yeah, no
I'm
kidding. Thank
impressed.
you, all of you, for sticking it out, and hopefully you learned a little something. That'll be great. Yes, and we will chat with you all very very soon for more of season 4.
Sounds
All right.
good. Thank you, Alexa.
Yay. You're welcome, Heather. Thank you. And we'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.